Good morning. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, and we are continuing our tour of the FY26 budget. And we have with us this morning the Agency of Digital Services, ADS, and we have Denise Riley Hughes, who's the Secretary and Chief Information Officer. I'm reading right off your chair. And Kate Slocum, the Chief Financial Officer. So thanks for coming. It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
And if you want to introduce yourself, oh, and we have, thank you, Scott Campbell here from House Energy and Digital Infrastructure.
That's correct.
Okay, so feel free to raise your hand and if you need to ask any questions while we're here. So I think that's everybody, and introduce yourselves for the record and take it away, please.
For the record, I'm Denise Riley Hughes, the Secretary for the Agency of Digital Services and also the State CIO.
And I am Kate Slocum, the Chief Financial Officer for the Agency of Digital Services.
So we have come prepared based on an outline recommendation that was provided to the agencies on what we believe and hope that you would like to hear. So if you want us to stop at any point or move on from something that you're not interested in hearing about, we're happy to do so. We have about 12 slides that'll be a good starting point from maybe a little reiteration from when we first came, just as a reminder, because it factors into what we'll be talking about on budgeting. But just stating our mission and vision. Our mission holds true as we were established in 2017 as an agency, that we are in place to work together with our partners in state government to deliver simple, intuitive technology solutions that improve the lives and citizens of Vermont. And our vision is to make government services secure and easily accessible to all people doing business and interacting with the state of Vermont. These are both the mission and vision that were established in 2017, and they definitely hold true today. They help us focus on our guiding principles. And so to add a little context into where we are as an organization here, we're focused on 4 key areas around our strategic initiatives, those being user experience. And there's a couple of different audiences that we consider in that, one being Vermonters ultimately, but also being our partners in state government is another audience, users across the state of Vermont as being employees, as well as our staff as an audience in that as well. Standards, and I think that there's been a lot of discussion around standards. This is both industry standards, security standards, frameworks that we're using, configuration modeling and standards. And so we are looking to really tighten up on all of those so that we can ensure consistency across the agency and also across platforms. Simplifying and reducing complexity. This speaks to both our technology and our financing and our breadth of platforms and products and services. And then predictability, which I think that we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about those bottom 2.
Sounds good.
So in our annual report every year, and this is a dashboard that we keep updated annually, it gives a snapshot both of point in time, and this is looking at end of year, but as well as over the course of the last almost 8 years that the agency has been in place. And Kate, you do a much better job because you've been presenting this longer than I have. But one thing too that I always take a note on is, one, we're supporting 12,000 users across state government. So this includes both executive branch agencies and departments, commissions and boards, the elected offices. We do not directly support legislature, and we are not directly supporting judiciary when it comes to the core foundations. But as we look at some of the platforms that we're using, so I know ERP comes up and this is now becoming a 3-letter word, almost a 4-letter word, but it is the current systems now, Vantage, Vision, and BTHR, you are all using as users as well. So is judiciary, and we will see a transition of that of the new system. So we do include you as users in some of the services that we deliver. We track our customer satisfaction rating. That is typically our help desk response effort. So when folks are calling in or emailing or opening tickets on their satisfaction for, did they get what they wanted? That's something that we're really working to building metrics around how do we improve that score. And I know there's a couple of financial highlights that,
Yeah, so our entire budget for, budget request for fiscal year 26 is just under 138 million. This is broken out across a few different direct appropriations, but primarily within the internal service funds. The major internal service fund, which we are responsible for, is the Communication and Information Technology Fund. And you can see a breakout on this slide of what that request is, $133 million to support state government. We also have a portion of internal service funds under the Financial Management Fund, which is also a vision fund, so that supports the current ERP projects of systems of Vision, Vantage, and Success Factors, the HCM. We do receive a couple of direct appropriations that's specific for our GIS team, also referred to as BCGI. That's under the Municipal and Regional Planning Fund, General Fund, and the BCGI Fund. So that brings a total of $1,037,000 in total request. One thing to note on this chart is that when the agency was established, we were given the mission to identify cost avoidance and savings across the enterprise.
Can you tell us where you are?
Yeah, I'm
sorry.
lost.
We're still on page 2.
oh, we're just looking at the dashboard.
We are, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I was focusing on the left.
There's a
hand.
lot going on in there.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so that right after ADS matrix, the vertical column.
Exactly, yes. So we have, over the course of the establishment of the agency, accumulated a total of $45 million in cost savings for the enterprise. That's been identified through multiple efforts of our agency to bring together services in a uniform manner, whether it be to reuse already existing tools across the platform, or to identify redundancies that exist across the enterprise and bring them into a shared approach. That number has been validated across the agencies. So every time we identify a potential savings, we do work with our customers to confirm that they are seeing that savings within their budget as well.
And I'm going to focus on the far right side of the column that's in the orange coloring. Those are numbers that we're starting to see trend differently. And although the dashboard is a snapshot point in time, it's not showing that trend analysis. The cyber threats avoided, that number continues to grow. So this is just a snapshot at a top level per top incident, not the individual transactions. If we were looking at a transactional level, it would be in the billions. So that number continues to grow. And as the online presence continues to deepen, that number will continue growing as well. And the transactions, those are services that are linked online under Vermont.gov. DMV is a good example. These are transactions that are flowing through the State of Vermont's website around interactions that the public is doing with the state. So renewing.
Department would be.
Renew, yes, yep, all of those. So we track that number. Right now, we're also showing 241 public-facing services that ADS is managing. And our vacancy report tends to stay roughly about the same. So I think that we were close to that same percentage this time last year.
Yeah.
Just quickly, when you say public facing, can you just clarify what that means? Is that like an online form that you might fill out to get a license, or?
It could be an online form.
On the claim?
Yes, anything that we have created as a system used by a department or agency, commission or board, where there is a public facing component to it, where they're interacting with the system. So yes, the DMV registration, soon to be the driver's license, will be one, tax is another. And so these are independent systems.
Wayne?
Do you see the threats coming in? Are they more diverse or is it just a volume increase? What's the nature of diversity?
I think they're getting more sophisticated. I would say that they are definitely diverse. We are seeing external threats to our websites. We are seeing vulnerabilities in our systems that have the potential for exposure. The good thing is we have not, God, you don't say these things out loud when you're in tech, as far as the breaches go, but we've been very fortunate in that area. But the model of zero trust is assume breach. So we really try to look at how do we mitigate that as best as possible. But it's real. And user generated, so inside user, if we don't have security provisions in place high enough for the users that we enable in systems, we open the risk of those users who are not security experts to create risk as well.
More greater risk internally than externally.
There is, yes. Are there any questions before we move on from that? Thank you. So we wanted to share some highlights and successes, and this is something that we don't do a lot because we're typically behind the scenes. And I think that lends itself to the confusion of what is it that you guys really do? And so we're touching everything when it comes to technology across the organizations that I referred to before. But for this particular year, we were able to add another $3.4 million saved, which is both in savings and cost avoidance. That adds to the cumulative 45 million, and we anticipate that to go up with a couple of projects that we have launched of recent, because we've projected them as a cost savings as well. When it comes to who Vermont is in the technology space as US states, we are one of the leading US states in artificial intelligence. We were the first one to create an AI director position, and that has proven itself to be very useful in both engaging and managing the possible growth and unplanned growth of AI. We don't want it to be unplanned. We want to have some guardrails and governance around it before it gets out of control. We were also the first to establish a chief data and AI office within a US state. And so we're starting to see other states catch up to where we're at, but we are definitely leading in Vermont, which is a badge of honor that we like to hold. We initiated our first security policy. We've always had security guidelines, and we have an official security foundations policy that has been shared with both other branches of government, and we encourage that they look at adopting the same practices. We had a successful post-flood effort around our Wireless First initiative. So as a user in state government, if you went to another office that your department or agency didn't have presence in, you wouldn't necessarily be able to access the state network. In a matter of months, we were able to change that immediately, especially when it came to COOP plans. It came to being able to stand up office space for those who on State Street were moved out of their offices for a long period of time. And so this has allowed us a Wireless First initiative around the 312 office buildings and locations that we're supporting. And it's been a great precursor to launching the network modernization project that we're about ready to kick off. We also released our first Cyber Advisory Council report. So the Cyber Advisory Council was created session of 23. Thank you. And so that report is out. This is specifically focused around critical infrastructure as a whole estate approach and looking at building best practices among those critical infrastructure industries and areas that serve Vermonters. So we've got a lot of strong representation from those communities on the board. I don't want to read verbatim, but we took summer EBT from a project that was expected to be 11 months long and not be able to generate the results for 40,000 children in Vermont. And the ADS team was able to pull AHS and AOE together and actually launch something in a matter of weeks. So I think 12
It
weeks.
was a big deal.
It's huge.
It was going to be, we were going to hold off for a year, and that was not a good thing.
It wasn't, no. And to know that we impacted 40,000 kids
Yeah.
was definitely it was an eye opener for the team to get them to understand what lean in really looks like and being able to bridge some gaps where if somebody has data over here and somebody has data over here, but we're the ones managing both instances on behalf, how about we work together to get them to collaborate? And so it was good. And I think that you'll start seeing more of that as well. The Secretary of State Business Filing System did launch, which was a really great project that we worked with them on and their partner. DMV core modernization launched for phase 1. We also moved some disparate call centers, some that were stood up during the pandemic and some that existed before that were inconsistent and let me use the word unmanaged into a single cloud hosted platform that has driven consistency around 15 different call centers across agencies and departments in the state. And so this was a really strong success. This also gives us an option to add those additional services. So I think that you've probably heard feedback around, VDOL having high wait times. This now gives them the tools and the resources to have some automated services built into their call handling. It also gives them a chance to mitigate some of that call volume issues that we didn't really have those resources before. So VLETs, and then also we can officially say that we're out of the data center business. So we are fully hosted for our data centers, both public and private cloud. We don't have the resources to keep server administrators, physical servers in-house. We just don't have the scale and capacity. So we've got an organization in Vermont who is hosting all of our physical servers. We also have the mainframe hosted in a hosted mainframe environment. And then we've got public cloud services as well.
And what's VLEDs?
This is the public safety. I printed it off and it's so small that my glasses won't let me read it.
Scott, you don't know what that is? Okay.
We do, but sorry. John Kelly, our chief of staff, keeps me in line sometimes.
Okay, somebody let us know what it is. That would be great. Let Jim know.
Likely, I'm going to get somebody texting me saying,
Rep. Stevens.
If you had a microfilm reader, perhaps you'd catch it. So if you're not hosting or there's no servers that are state-owned or what have you, they're serviced elsewhere, we had taken testimony very, very early on from state's attorneys, and they were talking about the video footage storage, and you sent them a huge bill, and they didn't know like that, whatever, that they use 2% of the time and they have 65% of the storage or whatever.
Yeah.
Where does that stored? I mean, how is that, why was, and maybe why was that such a surprise, considering that the policy obviously was, if you have body cameras, you need to keep the footage.
Yeah. So I'm going to use a non-technical reference to explain it. So it is like you are putting something away in a closet in your bedroom, but you don't realize it, that you need it every single day and it should be sitting on the kitchen table. And so they were using storage that was really not meant for the purpose that it was intended to be. And that speaks to the user experience piece. I don't think we've ever really sat down and said, what is it that you do and why do you do it? And what do you need to do? And video storage footage is not, especially things that are either duplicative files or case files, where they were storing it, no one ever said, hey, maybe you shouldn't store it there, until it became a problem. And so we're trying to build some practices to be able to mitigate that. But we have looked at what different tiered storage would be. in instances like that, and we're in the process of working with them to move it over to a more cost-effective place.
And so for committee or for the chair, so in the case where we talk about, we talk a lot about adding whatever percentage, and a lot of it's been on salaries and benefits and pay acts and changes. But in a case like this where, again, there was and this is like a base versus one time or a
Right.
base question of just saying, well, one of the reasons we don't throw everything into base whenever we feel like it is because of the we don't know what the costs may be. And this sounds very much like a cost that is a base cost. It may not be the same amount of money that they got billed at, but is that what we're talking about when, you know, if we're trying to add things to the base, then, you know, we have to take into consideration whether their salaries, so they go up 3 to 5% every year. But in this seems like an extreme case of unintended or unknown or unanticipated
Yeah.
expenses. Am I getting that?
Yeah,
right?
and it's interdepartmental or inter-service or something, so it's, which is base. It just doesn't show up as general fund, although it kind of ultimately does.
Well, it did in the BAA because all of a sudden they got a bill.
Yeah,
All right, no, thanks.
yeah. Things are not always as straightforward as
Yeah.
one might think they
Yes.
are. Yeah, exactly. I see Rep LaRouche and then Rep Dickinson.
So they have storage, this, in terms of the cost or the ability to get storage, that's not an issue.
No.
The ability for them to transmit video to the storage that's acceptable. You have enough bandwidth to get the
Yes.
information down there. And I assume that there has to be some mechanism of indexing that so that they can retrieve the bit of information that, or the particular tape on a particular day, particular hour that they need. And so those are 3 different things. Are any of those things problematic in terms of funding or in terms of being able to be made to function?
No, what are the considerations in this particular case around where cost is going to increase in storage is how often you need to access it,
That's it.
how big your file size is going to grow to over time, because it likely wasn't a problem until all of a sudden it became a very comfortable place to put all the storage, but there was no room for it, and it wasn't the right place to put that storage.
So it's the bandwidth, the transmission bandwidth is a big problem.
It's right now they are putting it in a location that is cost based on capacity. So the size of your storage. There's others that are priced based on egress and ingress. So how often that you actually need to touch it. And then others that are, like you said, storing and sharing. And so hot, cold, warm storage, that's really those tiers that we need to look at. But being able to have the business agencies, departments help build that business case when they've decided that they've outgrown the current service. And we're at that point with state's attorneys and sheriffs, and they've been very great working with us. So we have the options. It's just a matter of now the details. Who needs to access it? Is it somebody internal or somebody external? Are you actually file sharing with another agency? What are your data retention policies? So there's a lot. And is there a compliance requirement associated with it? Because then that would add a whole other layer of complexity and cost.
And how soon do you need it?
Yes. And how often do you need it? Mhm. So there is definitely a lot that goes into it. And so how do you demystify that for a broader user community of 12,000 users? And then do you want to make a decision solely based on price, or do you want to make a decision based on value and impact to the Vermonter? And so there's a lot of various factors that have to go into that. But with this one, what we're trying to do is mitigate any more of these, and they're going to happen. We know that they're going to happen because we can't do everything, but we're gonna try to make sure that we at least put the options on the table and reduce the instance of these things happening.
Yeah, thank you. This sounds like it's the devil in the details, and you had storage, someone just started storing it there because that was what.
Looked
they
good,
did.
yeah. Mhm.
So it's more complicated than
It
that.
is.
You had to, and the accessibility and the you just needed to be, everyone needed to be a little more organized and recognized sooner. Now, we saw it from the state's attorneys and from probably the court system and the police. Are there other areas that, now that you've seen this, that you need to sit down and go through?
Everybody.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Because they'll all have some stuff they need to get immediately, and then some stuff that can go in storage and you look
Yes.
at it maybe every 5 years.
Exactly. Yeah, and we're actually working really close with Vasara right now, because if there are records retention policies and they've accepted various departments and agencies' policies, can we apply those policies to
Others.
where their data and storage is? And can we move that to where they're archiving information and just wash our hands of it? And in some cases, yes, and in most cases, probably not.
It just seemed to me there'd be other areas.
Yeah.
And we just had Diva in here. It seemed to me that there would be
Yeah,
times when you would need to have access to things immediately
right,
or very often.
right.
Other times it would be just stored back and.
Yeah. And then we're asking users to change, and change is hard. So we have to be cautious about how we approach it, but yeah. Vermont Law Enforcement Telecommunication System, VLETs. Thank you.
Say that one more time.
Vermont Law Enforcement Telecommunication System.
Okay.
So I think it is a project that our EVMO is working with them on. And so every 2 years, there is a nonprofit organization that runs a digital state survey based on capabilities, maturity, skill, all sorts of different factors. And they release this and send it to all the governors based on where their states score. And for the first time ever, Vermont was in the A category. And so that's something in the state technology space is a really big deal. We were one of only a few states that received an A, and then we also received first place in our enterprise computing space. So that is, sometimes we need to hear that we actually are doing a good job, because it's easy to share the bad. And for us, this was one of the goods. So for page 5, I'm going to let you talk
Yeah.
about the IT mod fund.
So as I noted earlier, we were talking about our base budget of about $137 million for an ask in 26. That is, that does not include the IT modernization funding, because IT modernization is not base funding. This fund was established in the 2023 session. And the fund is intended to support any new IT initiatives. It might be system upgrades. It might be that needs were identified for a new tool for offices to operate under. So there was $67 million that was set aside into this fund. It was taken out of general fund and put into the IT mod fund with the responsibility, the onus of managing that fund put on ADS. But the part that the legislative body plays in that is that we bring forward, the CIO and governor bring forward a list of priority projects to be funded under this fund, to be, receive appropriations, and the legislative body then will appropriate dollars through that fund. So this list here shows you the current projects that are funded under the IT Modernization Fund. You've heard a few of those mentioned already. Some we haven't spoken to yet, but we just thought it was a good time to not only identify that this is a one-time need that is ongoing in our budget at this time, but it's not part of the base. And you can see that we have listed out all the projects that are currently approved by the legislative body for expenditure under the IT Modernization Fund. And we are providing you just where we are at in those projects as far as a spend. You can see that there has been some activity, more in others for some of these projects. But there's still quite a surplus sitting in that fund. So we are accruing interest in the fund, and which is kind of a good thing, because as we'll talk about later, we don't have a funding source identified yet for any new projects down the road.
Go ahead, Jim.
So I just want to clarify, so there's approximately $63 million left in this fund.
That's sitting in the fund, yeah.
So if the Department of Labor and their ongoing project spend, pick a number, $2 million more on their modernization project, it's going to show up in their budget as $2 million, but the money will come from this fund, or is it show up in your budget?
So it really, the expenditures will occur in the ADS budget because this fund sits in the ADS budget. It doesn't sit in Department of Labor's budget. And the dollars spent on these projects are really reflective of the IT spend and not the business spend that may exist. That's separate from the IT modernization fund. This funding source was really identified to cover the true IT costs associated with these projects.
So it's not, other than the management of it, but the IT portion would not show up to the departments.
Right.
Okay, that's helpful.
So when it's time to charge, you do an interagency transfer to the other agency and it's showed up in the budget. Is that how that works?
No, this is only reflective of the cost borne by ADS. Yeah, so for VDOL, the unemployment insurance project, we know that they have resources tied into that project that the business is showing expenditures on. They likely have identified a funding resource within their base to cover those costs, or have come forward and asked for funding to support that project. That would exist in their budget, but it will not hit the IT fund. The IT fund is only intended to support the project, the IT project aspect. So the vendor resource we might need to bring on, and the ADS staffing resources.
So like the VDOL work going on there. So if you're doing that, so that's in your budget. So if that gets spent, it's there and they could have something in their budget would it be different?
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not like transfer the money, they're pulling money out of a special fund
Right,
to them to charge back.
right,
Yeah, I
that's
understand.
correct.
Thanks.
And we wouldn't, I mean, and that's a good example case because we would be bringing in resources that would not be tied to position IDs. They would be specific contract-based resources. And if there is an operating cost within the VDOL budget, these would be staff members that would already be part of VDOL. It just may be that instead of their hours being identified over here, their hours are now identified over here. So that's where we just don't have any control over that. If there were new positions that they got for this, they would obviously be reporting that as additional.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. So I guess I was wondering more about the funds. I think you said that the projects that are included in this fund currently were explicitly authorized by the legislature. I guess that means that there are a lot of other projects, or at least there are other projects that are ongoing and they're not in this fund. And for example, DMV phase 2. How is that being paid for?
That's in here. So phase one was not part of IT mod because that didn't exist at the time, but phase two is,
It
yes.
says phase 2 there, I'm sorry.
IE&E is not in there.
Yeah.
CCWIS is not in there, right? So a lot of the federally funded projects, that's a little bit harder to apply an IT mod model to because 90% of that funding in many cases is coming from the federal government, and that is much better handled with AHS. So our contribution or our state match would be in some cases 10%. So it's a different, it would be a whole different funding mechanism than IT mod.
So those two projects you just mentioned, IE and was it CC?
The child welfare, yes.
Are 90% federally funded.
I believe
So it
that
depends.
there's I think, I don't know exactly.
The allocation changes slightly within each of the projects depending on what effort it is, but it's heavily funded with dollars and there is a matching component. General fund is used. General fund is the only fund that is really allowable to use against a federal dollar. And because we can maximize, the state as a whole can maximize the use of a general fund dollar, that's the better way to go to fund those projects than through the IT mod fund.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, the $67 million that seeded the IT modernization fund, I guess in 2023, that was one-time money.
That was a one-time general fund transfer. There was a surplus at the time, and it was decided by the legislative body that it was a great place to put the funding. But it was also noted at the time that in the future, we need to work together to identify what's the sustainable funding source for this, knowing that general fund might not always be available to support this fund. So that's some of the work that we're looking forward to doing with the legislative body.
One last question, and I guess that's what we talked about the other day, yesterday. Are there other projects that you can foresee on the horizon that will be major expenditures that would be candidates for an IT modernization fund if we have revenue to support it?
I'm sure there are.
I have a laundry list. I'm sure everybody else does, but I think that a lot of these you'll see came up sometimes out of demand, sometimes out of necessity, priority, statute, whatever it may be. And so, yes, we're always going to have projects, but I think that we're at a point right now where we've plateaued on modernization to be able to complete some of these. So in FY26, we will see the AGO case management, WIMS, DMV phase 2, fire safety, and the network mod project. Those should all be coming to completion by the end of FY26, if not end of calendar year 26.
So we'll be
And so-
spending a good amount of time over the next 12 months identifying what's on the docket next.
And where is there room for it? Right.
Yeah.
And do we have capacity for it?
Yeah, it seems like this is the kind of thing, these are major expenditures, obviously.
Yes.
It's the kind of things that in the case of physical infrastructure, we would be putting aside money to support.
Yes.
So we should be doing that for this as well.
I think that we'll talk more about what the business portal looks like, because I think we've talked about that a little bit through Secretary of State's office. There is an initial navigator piece, but the business portal is how businesses interface with the state overall. And I see that as being a candidate for something like this. Exactly.
As well.
Exactly. I want to blaze over number 6 because I don't realize how much I talk until the time is up. So we have two top recovery categories that we recover funding for. We are an internal service agency. We are 92% chargeback. So allocation is IT foundations. Our allocation, you'll see in the next slide, has been pretty static. Demand has 4 different categories, and I'm a visual person, so I wanted to make sure that when you hear demand, that it's 4 different areas. SLA and timesheet is what you'll hear the most of, because that's a number that we're trying to drive down. Bespoke ends up being those one-times, those unique, onesie twosies, but they're specific to a department or an agency, and not something that would be holistically across the board. So this is just a quick snapshot on slide 7. That is, our overall base is going down. And the reason being is right now we're tracking about 50 projects that will go into the maintenance and operations stage, which would mean that the cost of managing and maintaining the partner, the implementation costs and all of those will subside, and we'll just go into that management and operations phase. All right, so the big spreadsheet, I'm going to let you cover this because this is the ask now.
Yeah.
And this is our internal service fund breakdown now based on the 2 categories, allocation being green and demand being blue. The red is everything. So that's the total number.
Yeah, so this is the world that we live in today. And you can see that the blue and the red behind that have seen a steady growth up until 26. And it's really driven all around it's kind of reactionary, is how I would say. It's driven around the needs and desires of the agencies. And although we've tried really hard to bring standardization across the enterprise, it's been challenging because our standardization lives in that green. And we haven't had an ability to really expand upon that green to make that shift out of the blue and into the green, where we can start to bring uniform standardization across the enterprise and start to cut back on that demand or reactionary spending. So in 26, like we had said, we are seeing a little bit of a decrease, but again, it's all based on demand. It's not based on that standardization that we really need to move forward to. So something that Denise and I and others on the team have worked to identify, and also in cooperation with finance and management, is what does standardization look like? And we've defined that as core enterprise services. And really what that is to bring uniformity across the enterprise to make sure that the end user and the customer is receiving the same services regardless of what agency or department you report into, what your agency or department's funding structure is, which is a big change because how we've handled many standard services is to map the finances to however that agency is funded. And we found that that in some way hamstrings us. So we might see in one agency, they get an accelerated level of service from our team, but they're also paying premium price. And then in another area, they're getting more of a standard level of service, and they could or could not be paying a premium price. It really depended on what's your funding structure. So we're looking to move away from that. And if you go on to the next slide, what we're hoping to live into is moving away from this green box, and in 27, moving to this yellow box. And you can see it has a direct impact on our demand portion of our budget. And Denise, maybe you want to talk more about.
I do. So there is a request in the governor's budget that's a $15 million transfer, and that gives us the first fiscal year in a 2 fiscal year rollout of being able to adopt this new model of operating. So from a finance perspective, what it does is it reduces the demand, which is the majority of that is SLA and timesheet billing. So if you have the money to pay for the resources, then you get the time and attention for those resources. We need to stop doing that because it's creating inequities across our departments and agencies. But then that also relates to the ability for them to deliver those services directly to Vermonters. And so this would be the $15 million essentially buys down the SLA, which would be a future invoice for 27. If you remember, that's the picture of the credit card. So today, agencies consume technology services this year. They don't get invoiced for them until next year. And so if we were to make such a big shift like this, then all of a sudden they're going to get 2 bills from us for poor services. So this would be a way to pay based on how it should be paid, which is in fiscal year. And it also establishes a standard. So that core enterprise services number is tied to services, which is all of these items here on slide 9. Everybody should be paying the same rate for network access. And this is the network access. If you want more than that, you can pay more, and that's going to show up in demand. But everybody should be able to have a viable level of net. And we've never been able to do that with our services. And so this will be that first step to do so. The second phase is going to be leveling the bill rate appropriately. Our bill rate is $84 and $88, which if you do the math on that, even at 60% utilized, you would never be able to pay for the salary and benefits associated with a resource. And so the agencies have been, I hate to say getting away with it, but they've been able to take advantage of timesheet billing resources and not actually paying for that resource. And so it drives the agency into a deficit.
So the 15 million you said is a 2-year phase-in of the new billing system.
Right. It's the
One
first,
15
it's the
million.
first year, right?
115 million the following year too.
No,
No,
15 million is the total.
Covers 2 years?
no, so it does, yes and no. The 15 million covers core services. And so what the 15 million does is it pays and normalizes the standard services. So what we're charging agencies for network services, what we're charging them for base productivity, their identity, which is their user account to be able to get into the technology services that we're putting in place, to help desk, user support, security, which in our current model, it's built in a way that security is negotiable. And in my opinion, security is not negotiable because that puts us at risk and it puts Vermonters at risk. And then also baseline data center.
I'm trying to follow.
Mhm.
So fiscal year 26, the core services, 13.3 billion, 13.3 in the chart here,
Yes.
right? And then it goes to fiscal year 27, estimated to 42. So it's 29 million increase. Where does the 15 million?
Do the number.
right. So the 15 million that we are asking for in FY 26 is really a true up to be able to move those services out of the demand and into the CES model in 26, but not put the financial burden on each agency and customer in 26. In
Okay.
20,
Okay, now it's starting to say, bear with me, and I heard, we talked about this yesterday with representative
Yeah.
people, and I'm a little slow at times.
You're ahead of me.
No, so your choices were for fiscal year 26 is to charge that increase to all of their agencies or to subsidize it as a 1-year transition.
Right.
Is that what
That's
we're talking about?
It's subsidizing
We're gonna pay
it.
the 15 million one way or the other.
Exactly. But we're asking you to pay it now so that we can actually transition and start this now so that we can. What it does is all the things in the
Okay,
blue.
what if we don't do the 15 million?
Then the cost of IT is going to continue going up unmanaged and unpredictable. And you're going to continue seeing BAA requests that are out of control.
Okay, well, that's not a good option.
We
No, this is.
yeah,
we've never fixed the model and this gives us a chance to do so. We worked really closely with Commissioner Gresham and Deputy Commissioner Merrill on this is what we have and this is what we need to be. And I would like to charge less on timesheet billing so that if I have ADS resources, they should be available to everybody, not just those who have the money to pay for it or have figured out how to ask for the money. So it needs to be equitable and it needs to be a reasonable, effective level of service.
Get back to like the healthcare, the 18.5 million we put in the BAA. We didn't pay it, we were just gonna pay that plus some later.
So what I think this also does as well is now that we're in the yellow, we have specific services tied to that, not 25 pages of general ledger. And it allows us to focus on the blue to say, what are we duplicating our purchases in? How do we downspend on that demand rate? And why is it so high? So now we have a better way of scrutinizing that because it doesn't reflect core services, the foundational services that have to be in place.
Okay, I'm looking at the time and we need to get to the ups and downs, so quick.
Okay, well, so the 29 million dollars, roughly difference between what's in yellow in FY 27 and FY 26, right? So the $15 million. What I actually understand is set. And then
But they're actually consuming it in, we're receiving the invoicing and they're using it in 26. It's the credit card.
Just a year delay.
Yeah, we want them to stop using it.
The other 14 million of the difference would be FY 27 appropriation. Is that?
That is, so that's what we'll work on. We'll see what the committees approve this year because
That's the projection.
that is the hope is that we can cut that that number and it will be sitting at a service level. I'm not using the right words. You know what it is? I'm visualizing what we're doing. So this is just a projection. This is an estimate just to visualize it. In 27, that'll be the second year of the full cutover into this model. And so how we ask for it is going to be determined on what happens this year and what we work with finance and management on that will be equitable and effective going into 27. But from a basic perspective, this is what we would want to see.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple more minutes and let's just go through we don't need to talk about the salaries and the standard, but what's different in here?
So the biggest change is what we spoke to earlier,
Right.
and that's in the operating expenses where we're seeing a drop in demand around the more than 50 projects that will be moving from the design and implementation phase to the operational phase. Now, the question has been asked, would we see this down in the associated budgets across the agencies? Not necessarily. This is reflective of the resources that ADS has to bring to the table. So what it's telling you is that we're not going to need the additional vendor resources or the additional PM, BA services that we provide to these projects. Agencies and departments could, because it's moving into an operational phase, they could have a level or an increase in their budget depending on the needs of that project in operations. They might have a down, that's possible, but they might have a shift. But what we're seeing for 26 is that we will have a down in our demand side of the budget.
Yeah, no, I said, going over it a couple times.
Yeah.
It's helpful, but, one of my other budget areas, like our lotteries we talked about yesterday, has a 1.8 million one-time expenditure for a software upgrade for their liquor system.
Yeah.
And we heard about that in committee, Monday, I guess. In spite of this overall being down, and I know you just charged it back, is that still in there? Okay, but you have, then there are other departments that have, ongoing upgrades, that are in here, but overall you have more that we're not doing anymore.
Right.
Right.
$8 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Is the special fund in here, is that IT modernization fund?
No, this is our base budget. IT modernization is not part of
It's not
base.
basic.
So the special fund in here is the municipalities fund, which is seeded by property tax transfer used for our GIS team, as well as the BCGI fund, which is $15,000. The majority of it is the municipalities.
Thank you.
I'm letting you take over. I have to go to a meeting, so.
And we're getting skinny on our numbers, so is there anything left?
We cleared the room.
Yeah. any- Representative Campbell, if you go on any further, you're gonna become a member of Appropriations. Anything else that you would like to share?
No, other than we're happy to come back. And I know that we introduced some new concepts and thoughts. And if available and when available, I'm happy to go into detail.
This is actually very helpful, and Ken are going to also the transitional billing chain, and guide us with some more information, but no, this is very helpful, and I guess I would ask if there are any other questions that members have at this point.
Just thought, I like the idea of the 15 million, with that shifting that down, but just as a question, would that be a shift in terms of some of the agencies would be paying that out of other funds? If you didn't do that, they're going to be paying you fees out of other funds. So I would expect that there'd be some shifts in where that money comes from. It's coming from a different pot this time. It's coming out of general fund. It came out of there My thinking was that some of it could be federal money coming the other way, so it's probably not, we're never gonna know the answer to it till it's over with.
Well, I think it's a great comment and a good question. We realize that currently under the allocation model, the agencies use a mix of funding to identify what's allowable. And we intend to provide that level of detail so they can do an analysis. We've talked to a few partner agencies about this concept and if they foresee challenges using whatever funding they have available. And the resounding message has been, there's no red flags at this time. Because we've really looked at identifying what's core, what are the real core costs? The response received has been positive.
And at a per user cost, these aren't things that would be unique to where a lot of those federal monies come in. And if they do, we have an opportunity to level throughout the year. If there's, let's say, a per user license cost built into something, we would work to reduce that at term of anniversary of the contract. But that gives us that control to be able to do that. And this is what I would consider predictability. So that number should be able to remain steady rather than seeing that increase that you see in every fiscal year. It's unmanaged. We need to bring some management into it.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, any last minute comment? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
It's well, and Kristen and Tim. We will, House Appropriation will return at 1 o'clock, and I believe at the Department of